Out of breath, Kieran huffed and puffed as he stepped onto the compact sub-elevator, which was now transporting him from the medical bay of the Zenith Spire to the Helios Arena, an entire level dedicated solely to the sport of gravball. This private lift was strictly reserved for members of the Zenith Spire's gravball team and affiliated personnel. His eyes scanned the transparent walls of the elevator, taking in the breathtaking view of the Ether Academy. Like most elite private lifts, this one was external, clinging to the side of the spire, offering a stunning panorama, unlike the larger reinforced internal elevators, which prioritized functionality over aesthetics. From here, Kieran could see the towering skyline of the academy. 100 immense spires piercing through the dense ivory clouds produced by the atmospheric processors, ensuring the Ecumenopolis remained habitable for a variety of species. Golden circuitry traced intricate patterns along the structures, seamlessly integrating into the automated logistics network. If nothing else, the Academy shared one undeniable similarity with Earth: drones. Countless drones. Every conceivable task had been automated, from logistics to maintenance. Kieran's father, however, remained an old-school businessman, insisting on human labor where possible. Most corporations, however, had long since abandoned that model, preferring the cost efficiency of drones over human employees demanding fair wages. The result? A labor crisis that Kieran had studied extensively during his economic courses. Automation had consumed entire industries, and though some sectors, like medicine, still required human expertise, the vast majority of jobs had been absorbed by AI and robotics. Prescription distribution, drones, cleaning, drones, transportation, largely automated, though Kieran still enjoyed the luxury of a personal chauffeur. He recalled a history lesson about the complete automation of traffic, which had virtually eradicated vehicular accidents. The same principle applied to security. Stores once needed human attendants to prevent theft, yet now drones handled surveillance and automated checkout systems, processed purchases seamlessly. The implications of automation had been a primary focus of Kieran's studies, not because his teachers emphasized it, but because he knew he would inherit one of the wealthiest enterprises in human history. If he was going to wield that power, he intended to do it for the benefit of humanity. But here, on Ether 9, things seemed different. The planet's economy functioned with just as much automation, yet it lacked the staggering poverty that plagued Earth. The question was, why? And how? If he could uncover that secret, perhaps he could reshape the fate of his own people. Ding. The elevator chimed, snapping Kieran out of his thoughts. The doors slid open, revealing a sleek bronze and white hallway leading to the locker rooms. As he stepped forward, the distant roar of the stadium crowd rumbled through the walls, a constant hum of energy punctuated by bursts of music. Yet here, in this corridor, there was only silence. No advertisement drones, no news feeds, just the quiet before the storm. Pushing open the locker room door, Kieran was greeted by the soft white glow of the overhead lights and a sharp voice laced with venom. "Ah, so the prodigal son finally decides to grace us with his presence," sneered Cale, his tone dripping with sarcasm. The tension was palpable. It was no secret that some of his teammates still resented how quickly he had secured a spot on the starting lineup. "Give it a rest, Cale. You know as well as anyone that coach wouldn't have picked him if he wasn't good enough," interjected Aelric, one of the few players who actually acknowledged Kieran's skill, even if they weren't exactly friends. They practiced together, but that was about it. "Or maybe he's just upholding the honor of his so-called distinguished bloodline," added Vex, his expression unreadable. That phrase again, distinguished bloodline. Kieran had heard something similar during his science lab placement. Was it a cultural reference? Some kind of status indicator? He made a mental note to investigate later. Before he could respond, the locker room door swung open again, and Coach Thal strode in, his mere presence commanding instant silence. With a curt grunt, he barked, "Line up!" The team snapped to attention, standing in perfect formation. Kieran followed suit. The key to being part of a team was blending in. Cohesion above all else. Thal paced like a drill sergeant before finally speaking. "Second match of the season. But don't let that make you complacent. We're up against the Frost Fangs. You all know what that means." Kieran technically didn't, but he had studied their history. The Frost Fangs were one of the Academy's most formidable rival teams, consistently making it to the season finals, the Apex Clash, the Gravball equivalent of the championship game. Last year, Zenith Spire had crushed them, securing their 16th consecutive title. No doubt, the Frost Fangs were out for revenge. "They're going to play dirty," Thal continued, his gaze sweeping over the team. "I expect you to hold your ground, play like it's the Apex Clash itself. We win this, and we're one step closer to securing our dominance." The players stood rigid, absorbing every word. "We have a new weapon in our arsenal," Thal added, "but we won't reveal it unless necessary. If they start pulling tricks, I'll give the signal. Then," he smirked, "we unleash the comet." Kieran tried not to grimace. He still wasn't sure how he felt about that name. It was the code name for a strategy he had developed during tryouts, one that involved using Gravball's repulsion field mechanics to launch the ball across the field, making it nearly impossible to intercept. The key difference now was that a teammate would be positioned at the far end to catch and score. He still found it a little ridiculous, but if it worked, he couldn't complain. "Now suit up," Thal ordered. "Game starts in 10. As the team dispersed, Kieran clenched his fists. The Frost Fangs were hungry for payback, but he had no intention of letting them take the win. Tonight, Zenith Spire would hold the line. Now was not the time to argue about a name change. A curt nod from the entire team, and they were off, filing out of the locker room and stepping onto the field. And what a field it was. The same place where they had trained countless times, yet the difference between an empty stadium and a packed one was night and day. During practice, the sheer scale of it faded into the background, the towering stands, the vast seating, the domed ceiling stretching high above. But now, there was no ignoring the sheer mass of 300,000 roaring spectators, double the capacity of the largest stadium ever built on Earth. Unlike Earth, however, technology here allowed every seat to have a perfect view. No clunky binoculars, just high-definition holographic lenses that projected the action as if you were right in the front row. And yet people still paid extra for those premium seats, just to witness it all unfiltered, to feel the raw energy of the game with their own eyes and ears, to hear the impact of every collision, at least whatever they could over the deafening roar of the crowd and the constant hum of snack and advertisement drones zipping by. Was it worth the price? Kieran pondered the thought, but quickly dismissed it. That wasn't how capitalism worked, and it was just as rampant here on Ether 9 as it was back home. People would pay absurd amounts for anything if they believed it had value, whether it actually did or not. For the players, the view was different. The field itself was illuminated by dynamic holographic billboards, vibrant musical fanfares, and streaks of neon light tracing through the crowd as drones zipped around like something straight out of an old cyberpunk movie. Unlike Earth sports, there were barely any non-players on the field. Aside from the referees, the teams were self-sufficient, with only their coaches and a handful of staff present. And now, presenting the home team. The stadium thundered with the projected voice of the announcer, not that it actually echoed through the space. With hundreds of species at the academy, each with its own language, everyone wore earpieces that instantly translated speech into their preferred tongue. In reality, the announcer's voice was simply transmitted directly to each person's earpiece, fine-tuned to sound as if it were booming across the stadium. Theatrics, always with the theatrics. This is the Zenith Spire, 16-time reigning champions of the Apex Gravball League. The eruption of cheers, roars, and alien battle cries shook Kieran to his bones, a cacophony of voices so distorted by sheer volume that no translator could possibly make sense of it. He would have been anxious, should have been anxious, if his father hadn't spent years drilling stage presence into him. Smile and wave, Kieran. Smile and wave. But none of his teammates played along. No acknowledgments, no grand gestures, just a steady, focused march onto the field, the complete opposite of the Academy's theatrical tendencies. And then, from the opposite tunnel, emerged their opponents. The Zenith Spire wore the Academy's colors as always. Their challengers, the Frost Fangs, stepped onto the field in striking blues, teals, and icy whites. Returning for a rematch after last season's bitter defeat, one of the oldest and fiercest rivals of the Zenith Spire, the Frost Fangs. Kieran technically didn't, but he had studied their history. The Frost Fangs were one of the Academy's most formidable rival teams, consistently making it to the season finals, the Apex Clash, the Grav Ball equivalent of the championship game. Last year, Zenith Spire had crushed them, securing their 16th consecutive title. No doubt the Frost Fangs were out for revenge. "They're going to play dirty," Thal continued, his gaze sweeping over the team. "I expect you to hold your ground. Play like it's the Apex Clash itself. We win this, and we're one step closer to securing our dominance." The players stood rigid, absorbing every word. "We have a new weapon in our arsenal," Thal added, "but we won't reveal it unless necessary. If they start pulling tricks, I'll give the signal. Then," he smirked, "we unleash the comet." Kieran tried not to grimace. He still wasn't sure how he felt about that name. It was the code name for a strategy he had developed during tryouts, one that involved using Grav Ball's repulsion field mechanics to launch the ball across the field, making it nearly impossible to intercept. The key difference now was that a teammate would be positioned at the far end to catch and score. He still found it a little ridiculous, but if it worked, he couldn't complain. "Now suit up," Thal ordered. "Game starts in 10. As the team dispersed, Kieran clenched his fists. The Frost Fangs were hungry for payback, but he had no intention of letting them take the win. Tonight, Zenith Spire would hold the line. Now was not the time to argue about a name change. A curt nod from the entire team, and they were off, filing out of the locker room and stepping onto the field. And what a field it was. The same place where they had trained countless times. Yet the difference between an empty stadium and a packed one was night and day. During practice, the sheer scale of it faded into the background, the towering stands, the vast seating, the domed ceiling stretching high above. But now there was no ignoring the sheer mass of 300,000 roaring spectators, double the capacity of the largest stadium ever built on Earth. Unlike Earth, however, technology here allowed every seat to have a perfect view. No clunky binoculars, just high-definition holographic lenses that projected the action as if you were right in the front row. And yet, people still paid extra for those premium seats, just to witness it all unfiltered, to feel the raw energy of the game with their own eyes and ears, to hear the impact of every collision. At least whatever they could over the deafening roar of the crowd and the constant hum of snack and advertisement drones zipping by. Was it worth the price? Kieran pondered the thought but quickly dismissed it. That wasn't how capitalism worked, and it was just as rampant here on Ether 9 as it was back home. People would pay absurd amounts for anything if they believed it had value, whether it actually did or not. For the players, the view was different. The field itself was illuminated by dynamic holographic billboards, vibrant musical fanfares, and streaks of neon light tracing through the crowd as drones zipped around like something straight out of an old cyberpunk movie. Unlike Earth sports, there were barely any non-players on the field. Aside from the referees, the teams were self-sufficient, with only their coaches and a handful of staff present. And now, presenting the home team. The stadium thundered with the projected voice of the announcer, not that it actually echoed through the space. With hundreds of species at the academy, each with its own language, everyone wore earpieces that instantly translated speech into their preferred tongue. In reality, the announcer's voice was simply transmitted directly to each person's earpiece, fine-tuned to sound as if it were booming across the stadium. Theatrics. Always with the theatrics. This is the Zenith Spire, 16-time reigning champions of the Apex Gravball League. The eruption of cheers, roars, and alien battle cries shook Kieran to his bones, a cacophony of voices so distorted by sheer volume that no translator could possibly make sense of it. He would have been anxious, should have been anxious, if his father hadn't spent years drilling stage presence into him. Smile and wave, Kieran. Smile and wave. But none of his teammates played along. No acknowledgments, no grand gestures, just a steady, focused march onto the field, the complete opposite of the Academy's theatrical tendencies. And then, from the opposite tunnel emerged their opponents. The Zenith Spire wore the Academy's colors, as always. Their challengers, the Frost Fangs, stepped onto the field in striking blues, teals, and icy whites. Returning for a rematch after last season's bitter defeat, one of the oldest and fiercest rivals of the Zenith Spire, the Frost Fangs. Another wave of cheers, though noticeably less enthusiastic. The favorites were clear. And why wouldn't they be? 16 straight years at the top, there were people in the stands right now who had never once seen the Zenith Spire lose in their entire lives. Sure, they'd be young, but still, the thought hit Kieran hard. That was the kind of legacy they were defending. But that didn't make the Frost Fangs any less intimidating. They had fully committed to the big, brutal warrior aesthetic. Their suits, like most Spire-funded teams, were custom-built. Only theirs were heavier, bulkier, clearly designed for a far more aggressive playstyle. That alone told Kieran everything he needed to know about their strategy. Not that he hadn't already done his research. You never went into a match blind if you could help it. As the announcer rattled off the history of the game and a brief rule breakdown for the newer fans, the Zenith Spire players gathered in a tight huddle for their final tactical meeting. Balin, the team captain, spoke in his usual measured tone. Listen carefully, warriors. As Coach Thal said, we are playing a game of deception. Let them believe we are unchanged. Let them think they know us. And when the moment is right, we will strike. A brief pause. If we can win with old tactics alone, all the better. Sora, get to the outer field immediately. Kieran, you'll have a side runner at the far end. They will underestimate you as even we once did and leave you exposed. Use it. Sora, they will target you first. Expect them to come for you hard. If you see an opening, take it, but I won't hesitate. The moment Kieran is clear, I take the shot. Everyone else, interference, standard patterns, disrupt their flow. Once we secure a lead, we focus on control and possession. Understood? A chorus of nods. No wasted words. No unnecessary explanations. Balin wasn't one for speeches. He was a leader on a mission. And Kieran respected that. Taking his position as a side runner, the gravball equivalent of a wide receiver, Kieran prepared himself. His job was simple. Find an opening, receive a pass, and push forward as far as possible before offloading the ball. Unlike traditional football, the play continued until possession changed or a team scored. Tackling wasn't about stopping the play, it was about forcing a fumble. But enough thinking. Time to play. The teams spread out, not quite a line, more like a two-dimensional plane, a shifting wall of motion. And immediately, the trash talk began. Zenith Spire has gone soft, I see, one of the Frost Fangs sneered. Letting weaklings into their ranks now? Perhaps they felt bad, another mocked. Or maybe the Academy forced them to take the thing because of its honored blood. Kieran clenched his jaw but held his tongue. He was about to fire back when Sora spoke first. Better than yours, soft blood. Remind me, what brothel did your mother work at again? The Frost Fang's growl was instantaneous. "I will kill you!" "I'd like to see you try, brute," Kieran smirked. Yeah, Balin didn't need my help. But before he could dwell on that thought, the whistle blew. Instantly, the field erupted into chaos. Players crashed into each other like a battlefield. Tackles, grabs, spins, near punches, and brutal body checks that only barely skirted the edge of legality. Kieran, however, was barely guarded. One defender had been assigned to him, but that wasn't even close to enough. He had trained against 3 at a time. In seconds, he broke away, leaving his opponent lagging far behind. And then, there it was. The opening. Balin had already seen it. The ball soared through the air, a perfect, calculated pass. Kieran didn't hesitate. He couldn't hesitate. He reached, caught it cleanly, and turned toward the goal. The lone Frost Fang chasing him had no chance. The gap was widening. The stadium collectively realized what was happening. A free goal. The buzzer blared. The repulsion field barely had time to activate before it flickered off. For a moment, silence. Then, chaos. The stadium erupted even louder than before. The human did it. Kieran caught a record-breaking pass from Balin and ran it straight to the goal. The Frost Fangs were completely unprepared, left scrambling with no response. "Did you see that speed?" A voice boomed through the stadium, one of the announcers, excitement crackling in his tone. "I did, Oren. I sure did," replied his co-host, their energy electric. Kieran Voss, son of that tech mogul from Earth, whose name has been making the rounds across countless worlds lately, has just demonstrated speed unlike anything we've seen in Gravball history. The Frost Fangs assigned only one player to mark him, and it wasn't even close to enough. If they want a shot at winning this rematch, they're going to have to start taking the Zenith Spire's newest recruit a lot more seriously. Even as possession changed and the Frost Fangs began their offensive drive, the crowd's roar barely dimmed. But defense was where Balin and the Zenith Spire had built their reputation, and it took just one play for possession to turn over again. A stunning intercept from Sora, perfectly backed by Balin's positioning, crushed the Frost Fang's attack before it could even begin. The next time around, they assigned 2 defenders to Kieran. Still not enough. Though they managed to pressure him more, it didn't stop him. Possession flipped again. Then again. And despite being swarmed by 3 Frost Fangs attempting to box him in, Kieran broke free to secure a 3rd goal. They should have known. He had made this team by evading an entire defense for 2 minutes straight during tryouts. There was no way they were stopping him in under 60 seconds. The next play didn't go as smoothly. Kieran was fast and strong, but against the sheer mass of the gourd players, he wasn't the most effective blocker. And in 0G, weight made all the difference. He did what he could, running interference, threatening intercepts. But eventually, the Frost Fangs pulled off their first goal after a grueling 6-play struggle. But the moment the Zenith Spire got the ball back, it only took 2 plays for Kieran to break away again. A quick pass, a burst of speed, and the ball was over the line. End of the first quarter, 4th to 1st. As the teams lined up for the second quarter, Kieran immediately noticed the change. The earlier chatter? Gone. The air between them was now ice cold. The Frost Fangs weren't just playing anymore, they were hunting. And their target? Him. They had adjusted, dedicating several players solely to shutting down Kieran's movements. Routes he had designed, ones he had abused all throughout practice, were suddenly being cut off before he could reach them. But their new strategy had a flaw. Kieran wasn't the real threat when they had the ball. Balin was. And the moment the Frost Fangs overcommitted to boxing Kieran in, Balin took advantage. Another interception. Another immediate turnover. Before they could even reset, the Frost Fangs coach signaled for a timeout. The teams returned to the sidelines, but Kieran barely made it 2 steps before his teammates were all over him. Frost's teeth, Kieran. Where was that during practice? Oh, you missed that day, didn't you, Yulin? When I first saw it, I couldn't believe it either. Speak for all of us. Kieran's as fast as a damn comet. Hey, maybe that should be your sports name. Not just the, well, you know. Yeah, but he did come out of nowhere, just like the real thing. And about as fast as one, too. Let's just hope he doesn't disappear as quickly. A round of laughter followed, with teammates offering congratulatory pats on the back, chest bumps, and friendly shoves. Even Sora, who had been openly bitter before, finally relented with a begrudging nod. You did well, human. Just keep it that way. Balin, as always, kept his words short. Just a nod of approval before his gaze flicked toward the opposing team's huddle. They're planning something. Kieran exhaled sharply. For once, it felt good to be recognized. Normally, he shied away from attention. But this took him back to his old team, his high school football days. Jake, Daniel, Jack. Then, he shook his head. Not the time for nostalgia. There were 2 more quarters left. 40 more minutes. The Frost Fangs broke from their huddle, and as both teams lined up again, Kieran prepared to showcase even more tricks. But something was wrong. Very wrong. Nearly half the enemy team was stacked on his side of the field, and they weren't positioned for standard defense. They weren't trying to stop the Zenith Spire. They were trying to stop him. What the hell are they doing? The buzzer blared. The play began. And then, chaos. Every single Frostfang was on him. No escape, no gaps, no angles. Within seconds, Kieran was completely buried under a massive pile of gored muscle and armor. The impact rattled through his body like a truck collision. Zero-G prevented a full-force slam into the ground, but it didn't stop the pain. A sharp crack echoed in his ribs, and a wave of bruising spread across his torso. The ball was already over the line. Balin had made an uncontested throw to Sora, who secured the goal. But the Frostfangs didn't seem to care. They didn't even move until the referee blew the whistle. By then, the medical team was already sprinting onto the field. Kieran barely registered the overlapping voices. No signs of shock. He's so young. First real game, too. We need to get him out of here. They started loading him onto a stretcher, but Kieran immediately raised a hand. Whoa, hold on. It's not that bad. He winced. Yeah, it hurts like hell. But aside from a cracked rib, I don't think anything's broken. The medical team froze. For a moment, silence. Then one of the doctors stammered, How are you even conscious right now? You should be in shock. After an impact like that, you should be suffering extreme internal hemorrhaging. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if you died on the way to the hospital. Kieran frowned, then sighed. Not again. Seriously, just run another scan. I can feel it. My ribs are bruised, yeah, but if it were broken, I wouldn't be able to move my arms like this. The doctors exchanged uncertain glances before pulling out more advanced diagnostic tools. The process dragged on for nearly 15 minutes, while the game continued without him. Finally, a stunned voice whispered, It's a miracle. Just as he said, another medic confirmed, eyes scanning the results. The internal bleeding has already clotted and mostly stopped. One rib has a minor crack, but a long pause. It's already beginning to heal. Kieran had had enough. Something about this wasn't right. Something was happening out there. See? I told you I'm fine. I can still play. I'm not a child. I don't need to be coddled like one. He caught himself before more of his pent-up frustration spilled over. The medics were just doing their job. They didn't deserve to bear the weight of years of resentment toward his overbearing, single-parent upbringing. But his brief outburst was enough to make them back off. Very well. Scans confirm your life is not in immediate danger, and the damage appears surprisingly minor. If you truly insist, you may return to the field. I do. They nodded and cleared the way. Kieran stepped out of the side room and back onto the field. Silence. The once roaring stadium had gone completely still. Camera drones locked onto him. some hovering uncomfortably close. Even the announcers, who had been filling the air with non-stop commentary, had fallen silent. Kieran activated his EVA suit, floating up to retake his position on the field. That's when he saw the scoreboard. 5-5. What the hell happened? In the time he was gone, the Frost Fangs had evened the score. That made no sense. The Zenith Spire had dominated before he even joined the team. They had beaten these same players last season. So what changed? Coach Thal called for a timeout. The team huddled, but this time there were no jokes, no pats on the back, just concern. Frostclaw, Kieran, are you all right? You may not be as soft as the other off-worlders, but that was 10 Frost Fangs piling on you. That would have killed anyone else. Yulin's voice carried a rare hint of unease. I may not like the competition for Side Runner, Sora added, but I wouldn't wish that on you. Even Sora was concerned. That alone was unsettling, but Kieran wasn't here to talk about human durability. He wanted answers. I'm more worried about you. What the hell happened? 4 unanswered goals? You didn't need me before I joined, so what changed? Balin spoke up. They adapted. It wasn't as obvious with you stirring the storm in their strategy, but they haven't been lazy in their training. They've specifically developed counters for all my tactics. Adapting on the fly has been challenging. Kieran frowned. That dog pile on me? A sacrifice. Balin's expression darkened. They willingly gave up a point just to take you out. They wanted to remove the only thing standing between them and the Apex clash, permanently. They tried to kill you, Kieran, and now here you are. Kieran's stomach twisted. Is that even legal? Not just in the game, but like, attempted murder level illegal? Balin shook his head. Impossible to prove. To an outside observer, it just looks like an overreaction to your hot streak gone wrong. None of them will crack under questioning. Their loyalty to their coach is unwavering. That's ridiculous. Please tell me they at least got heavily penalized. Munar let out a heavy sigh. Technically, yes. The referees upheld our free point and let us keep possession. But they have countered my entire playbook. Every strategy, every formation, we don't have a single move they haven't prepared for. The second quarter just ended. We only have one left. And with your injuries, I don't think it's wise to— I'm fine! Kieran clenched his fists. Let me worry about what I can and can't do. I'm good to play. Whatever you need. Whatever it takes. Balin studied him for a moment before nodding. Apologies. I did not mean to insult your honor. You are right. It is for the warrior to decide if he is fit for battle. He turned to Coach Thal. Their eyes met. A slow, deliberate nod from the coach. We're deploying the Comet. Kieran didn't even care about the name anymore. Let them have it. As the teams lined up for the third quarter, Kieran saw it. The stunned, disbelieving faces of the Frost Fangs. He met their shock with an icy, defiant glare, the unspoken force of a cocked shotgun. They wouldn't understand the gesture, but they would understand what was about to happen. The play began. Kieran started with the ball this time, not Balin. Nearly the entire team formed a wall around him, a move that to outsiders would appear as simple protection for an injured player. But the Zenith Spire knew the truth. They were about to change Gravball history. Kieran flew backwards, fast, gaining distance. The stadium fell into an eerie silence. Even the news drones hovering above seemed frozen in place, as if unable to process what they were witnessing. The Frost Fangs, tangled in brutal clashes with the Zenith Spire, were slow to react. But then, they realized. The ball wasn't going to be thrown, and they turned. 3 of them broke away, charging after Kieran. Too late. The timer ticked down, the ball's repulsion field inverted, the force pressing outward, growing stronger. Kieran felt a sharp pang in his ribs. The crack was worsening, but he ignored it. He had to hold on. He twisted through the air, dodging a tackle. The field intensified. The ball nearly slipped from his grip, but he readjusted, tightening his hold, pain flaring in response. Then, impact. He slammed into an obstacle, but caught himself, using the momentum to push off. A frost fang lunged, missed, spun out of control, gone. Kieran grit his teeth. 1 minute. The repulsion field reached full force. The frost fangs couldn't get near him. 30 seconds. The entire stadium was silent. Even the announcers had stopped speaking. 10 seconds. Kieran's grip tightened. His chest burned. There, Balin, completely open. No defenders in range. Kieran let out a final pained shout and let go. The ball rocketed out of his grip, sending him spiraling backward. A comet streaked across the field, a glowing arc of light trailing behind it like a burning tail. Balin didn't even need to move. The ball slammed into his hands and the momentum carried him straight into the goal. Silence. Then, chaos. The crowd erupted, a volcanic explosion of cheers so deafening that it rattled the entire stadium. What was that? What under the suns of Voris was that? Kieran Voss has just made gravball history. No one in the entire galaxy has ever held onto the ball that long. It was impossible. It is impossible, but he did it. Did you see the streak? It was like the tail of a comet. That's it, Oren, that's his name. The comet, Kieran Voss, Voss's comet. And the stadium roared in agreement. The Frost Fangs coach called for a timeout, screaming at the referees. But before he could argue, one of the medics who had treated Kieran whispered something in his ear. The coach froze. Then, silently, he backed down. Coach Thal just smirked. The rest of the game? A massacre. The Frost Fangs were shaken. They had no strategy left. Final score, 9-5. As Kieran reached the edge of the field, gravity stabilizing, he collapsed, and the world went dark.